The man was standing near the reception desk with both hands folded in front of him, and no one was helping him. That was the part one noticed first. Not that he was old, not that he was well-dressed, not that the two receptionists were actively pretending to be occupied. I noticed the stillness of him. The patient, practiced stillness of someone who has waited before and knows how to do it without making a scene. Not restless. Not irritated. Just there, the way a person becomes very still when they've learned that moving draws the wrong kind of attention. It was a Tuesday, 8:47 a.m. I had been an intern at Delworth and Cho Financial Group for 11 days. I set my bag down by the elevator bank. I looked at the desk. I looked at him. I looked at Brianna, who was looking at her screen. I looked at Colt, who had a phone receiver pressed to his shoulder at an angle that suggested the call had ended some time ago. I walked over to him. I didn't think about it the way I'd think about it later, the way you reconstruct a decision and try to find the calculation inside it. There wasn't one. I just walked over and I raised my hands and I signed, "Good morning. Is there someone I can help you find?" He looked at me. His eyes went very still for a second, then something in them shifted, the way a window looks when someone finally opens it, and he signed back. I didn't know the CEO was standing 15 feet behind me. I didn't know who the old man was. I just knew he had been waiting and that no one had said a word to him and that I could. My name is Mara Voss. I was 23 that fall. I had a bachelor's degree in business administration from Ohio State, a GPA that was good but not remarkable, and a sublet on Fenwick Street in Clintonville that cost me $3,200 a month, which was more than my intern stipend covered. The stipend was $1,475 biweekly, which I had calculated before accepting would cover rent and utilities and not much else. I was eating a lot of pasta and telling my mom I was doing fine. The internship at Delworth and Cho was the one I'd wanted since junior year. Not because of the prestige exactly, though the name carried weight in Columbus, but because of what the firm actually did. Mid-market investment advisory. Real businesses, real families, real stakes. Not the abstracted money of a hedge fund somewhere, but the kind of finance where you could see the outcome in a person's face. I had applied twice. The first time I didn't get an interview. The second time I did, and I prepared for it for 3 weeks and I got the offer and I cried in my car in the parking garage of the building where the interview happened, and then I drove home and called my brother Theo. Theo is 4 years younger than me. He lost most of his hearing when he was 7, after a bout of bacterial meningitis that his pediatrician initially misread as a bad flu. By the time the correct diagnosis came, the damage was done. My parents grieved it the way parents grieve things, quietly, incompletely, while still making dinner and driving to appointments. I was 11. I didn't grieve it. I learned to sign. We started with a library book and a YouTube channel, Theo and I, sitting on the floor of his bedroom with the flashcards he made himself out of yellow cardstock. He'd draw the hand shape on one side and the English word on the other, and we'd go back and forth until the motion became automatic. By the time Theo was 12, we could have full conversations. By the time I left for college, ASL was just part of how I talked to my brother, the same way some families mix in another language without thinking. I brought his flashcard binder with me to Columbus. It sat on the nightstand in the sublet on Fenwick Street, the yellow cardstock edges gone soft at the corners from years of handling. The thing about Theo is that he never asked me to learn. He never pointed at the book or asked if I wanted to try. I just picked it up one afternoon because he was my brother and he was sitting there and it seemed obvious. I've thought about that a lot since, how the most important things sometimes don't announce themselves. They just sit there waiting to be picked up. The work of being an intern at Delworth and Cho was not glamorous, and I had not expected it to be. I pulled account files. I formatted presentations. I sat in the back of client meetings and took notes that were rarely read by the people who asked for them. I learned which associates actually wanted help and which ones wanted someone to hand tasks to so the tasks would disappear from their own lists. I learned the coffee situation on each floor. I learned that the second floor printer jammed at the left side paper tray and that if you cleared it without being asked, people acted like you'd done something remarkable. I stayed late when the work required it, which was often. I came in early when the morning had something to offer, which was also often. I was not trying to perform dedication, I was trying to understand the place, the rhythm of it, the way information moved and where it slowed down and what happened at the slowdown points. There were 6 other interns that semester. We were not in competition, officially. Unofficially, every room we shared together had a faint charge to it, the way air feels before rain. I made myself useful in the ways I could. I learned the client management system faster than the orientation expected. I flagged a discrepancy in a quarterly summary that an associate had missed. I mentioned it quietly to the associate directly and did not make a thing of it. The associate fixed the error and did not mention me in any subsequent conversation, which was fine. The error was fixed. That was the point. I reorganized a filing system in the third-floor storage room that had been a known problem for 2 semesters. No one had asked me to do it, and no one noticed immediately that it was done, and I did not bring it up. The contribution I understood I was making wasn't visible in any single day. It accumulated the way interest accumulates, quietly in aggregate, in a form that only becomes legible over time. I understood this about the work. I had come in understanding it. The lobby was its own ecosystem. I passed through it 4 times a day, morning arrival, lunch if I left the building, return, evening exit, and over 11 days I had developed a clear picture of how it functioned. The receptionists, Brianna and Colt, were competent and professional with clients they recognized and visibly slower to engage with anyone who didn't fit an expected pattern. This was not malicious. It was a habit of attention, the way all institutions develop habits of attention around the people they're used to seeing. I noticed the old man because he didn't fit the lobby's rhythm, and the lobby's rhythm had not adjusted to accommodate him. He stood at the desk with his hands folded, and Brianna was looking at her screen, and Colt was on the phone, and the man waited with the specific quality of patience that belongs to people who have spent a long time being waited on, or rather, being waited out. I had been signing for 12 years. It was not a performance when I walked over to him. I found out later that Director Halstead had been watching from the moment I set my bag down. He called me into his office at 2:15 that afternoon. I had met him once, briefly, during orientation. He ran the client relations division and had a reputation for being exacting in a way that his direct reports described carefully, with the specific care people use when they want to communicate something without committing it to language. His office had a glass wall facing the main floor. He was behind his desk when I came in, and he didn't gesture for me to sit. "Close the door," he said. I closed it. "What happened in the lobby this morning," he said, "was not something you were authorized to do." Something went still in my chest, not defensiveness, not surprise, something more like the sensation of a room going quiet before an announcement. "I helped a visitor," I said. "You inserted yourself into a client interaction without any authorization or context," he said. "You don't know who that man was. You don't know his relationship to this firm. You don't know what was appropriate. He was waiting and no one was helping him," I said. "That's not your call to make." He settled back slightly. "You're an intern. Your role does not extend to the lobby. Your role does not extend to client-facing anything unless you are explicitly directed." "I understand my role," I said. "I'm not sure you do." He folded his hands on the desk in front of him. "What you did was presumptuous. It made the reception staff look incompetent. It created an unauthorized interaction with an individual who's standing with this firm I'm not going to brief you on. And frankly, the whole display, the signing, the whole thing, it looked like you were performing." The room was quiet. "I wasn't performing," I said. "I was signing because the man is deaf and I know ASL. And how does that look to other clients who happen to be in the lobby? We don't know what that interaction communicated. We don't know if it was appropriate to the context." "I asked him if there was someone I could help him find," I said. "That was the whole interaction." He looked at me for a moment. "We have protocols for a reason," he said. "You'd do well to learn them before you decide to go off script." "The protocol you're describing," I said carefully, "would have left a guest of this firm standing at the front desk while both receptionists were otherwise occupied. I'm not sure that's the protocol anyone intended." Something shifted in his expression, not anger, not quite. The look of a man who had expected a shorter conversation. "The protocol," he said, "is not yours to interpret." I kept my hands still on the arms of the chair I hadn't been invited to sit in. Was there anything else? Something passed across his face, not quite surprise, not quite the thing he was reaching for. "You should think carefully," he said, "about how you present yourself here. Gratitude isn't a word I'd use for how you're conducting yourself." "Ungrateful," I said. "That's the word." He blinked. "If there's nothing else," I said, "I have a file pull due at 3. He didn't answer. I opened the door and walked back to my desk. No one on the floor looked at me. 3 people I could see clearly had the particular posture of people who have been watching something and are now very interested in their screens. I sat down. I went to the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee I didn't want. I walked back to my desk. I opened the account file I had been working on before 2:15. I read the same paragraph twice. I opened the ASL dictionary app on my phone and set the phone face down beside my keyboard. I formatted 2 columns in the spreadsheet. I sent an email confirming a document request from the morning. I looked at the clock. It was 2:41 p.m. I picked up my pen and wrote the word Theo on the corner of my notepad, then crossed it out. I pulled the next file in the queue. I did not look toward Halstead's glass-walled office. I did not look toward reception. I opened the next document and began to read. At 4:20 that afternoon, my phone buzzed with an internal calendar invitation. The subject line read, "Brief check-in, James Cho, Conference Room 4B, 4:45 p.m." I did not know who James Cho was. The name was half of the firm's name, which I understood academically but had not connected to a living person until I Googled James Cho Delworth Cho on my phone under my desk and found a Forbes profile from 4 years prior. James Cho, co-founder, the company's majority stakeholder and, for the past 18 months, its active CEO following the death of his co-founder, Robert Delworth. The profile included a photograph of a man in his early 60s, dark-framed glasses, an expression of total stillness. The man from the lobby. Something moved through me then, not panic, not relief, something more like the sensation of a picture coming into focus all at once. I gathered my notebook and walked to the elevator. Conference room 4B was on the 4th floor, glass-walled on 2 sides. When I arrived at 4:43, there were 4 people already in the room. James Cho seated at the head of the table, a woman I didn't recognize who appeared to be an executive assistant, and on the other side of the table, Director Halstead and his deputy, a man named Ferris who had never once looked directly at me in 11 days. I sat where the empty chair was, across from Halstead. James Cho looked at me and signed, "Thank you for coming." I signed back, of course. "It's good to meet you properly." The woman, Cho's assistant, spoke aloud to the room. "Mr. Cho signs that it's good to meet you as well." She paused. "He says he saw you in the lobby this morning." I said, "I know." Halstead shifted in his chair. The movement was small, controlled, but I caught it from across the table. Cho signed something further. The assistant translated. "He says he wants to understand what happened. He's spoken with Director Halstead already. He'd like to hear from you." I looked at Cho. He was watching me with the same quality of stillness I'd seen in his father. Not blankness, not distance, but the kind of attention that belongs to someone who has learned to read the parts of communication that happen below the level of words. "There was a man at the front desk," I said. "He was waiting. The receptionists were occupied. I could see he was deaf, he wasn't speaking, he was watching the room, so I signed to him. I asked if there was someone I could help him find. He said yes, his son. I walked him to the elevator and told the front desk which floor. A faint sound came from Halstead's side of the table. Not a word. A sound. Cho's assistant, I would learn her name was Dana, and that she was also a fluent signer, spoke aloud for the room. "Mr. Cho says he'd like to conduct part of this meeting in ASL, with Dana interpreting for anyone who needs it. He says that's a first for Conference Room 4B. "Of course," I said. "That's," Halstead started. Cho looked at him. Just looked. Halstead stopped. Cho signed something to Dana. Dana said, "He's asking Mara to describe what happened in the lobby this morning in her own words." I described it. Briefly, directly. The man at the desk. The receptionists occupied. The waiting. The decision to walk over. Cho signed something. Dana said, "He's asking if you were nervous." I thought about it. "My hands were a little cold," I said. "I haven't signed in a professional setting before. I wasn't sure I'd have the right vocabulary." Cho signed again and Dana translated. "He says your vocabulary was fine. He says you asked him if there was someone you could help him find, and that he said yes, his son, and that you walked him to the elevator and told the front desk which floor. He says that was the whole interaction. He wanted to know if that matches your memory." "Yes," I said. "That's what happened." Halstead cleared his throat. "I want to note for the record that the intern acted outside of her designated." Cho held up one hand. one hand flat, facing outward. Halstead stopped. Then Cho reached into the inner breast pocket of his jacket. He withdrew his phone, a plain dark case, no ornamentation. He opened an app. He turned the screen so it faced the center of the table and placed it flat on the surface where everyone could see it. It was a photograph. Lobby level, taken from somewhere near the elevator bank. Timestamp in the corner, 8:47 a.m. In the photograph I was signing. The old man, Cho's father, Raymond Cho, 81 years old, profoundly deaf since birth, was signing back. Both of us had our hands in the air. We were both looking at each other's faces the way you have to catch the full sign. Cho tapped the photograph once. Then he signed something long, something with several parts, and Dana translated it quietly. He says, Director Halstead told him this morning in a brief hallway conversation that the intern's behavior was presumptuous and a liability. He says he wanted to hear directly from the intern what happened. He says he now has. A pause. He says his father hasn't been inside this building in 2 years. He says the last time his father came, he stood in the lobby for 6 minutes before anyone acknowledged him. He says his father came back today because he forgot something in his son's office, a scarf. He says his father told him on the phone this morning that a young woman had signed to him before he'd even had to ask. The room was very still. Cho looked at Halstead. He didn't sign anything. He just looked. Then he looked at me and he signed, "You acted correctly." I reached into my bag. I took out my phone. I opened the ASL dictionary app that I'd had opened since 2:41 and turned the screen to face the table. I placed it flat on the surface beside Cho's photograph. I looked up 3 signs before I came up here, I said. In case I needed vocabulary I didn't have. Cho looked at the screen. Something moved through his face, not amusement, not sentimentality. Something that had no clean English name. He signed one word. Dana didn't translate it. She just nodded. I looked at Halstead then. I kept my voice even and my hands in my lap. You told me what I did looked like a performance, I said. It wasn't. My brother is deaf. I've been signing since I was 11. When I saw a man waiting and no one helping, I helped him. That's all I did. Halstead's jaw was set. There are protocols. There are, I said. And one of them, presumably, is that guests of the company are greeted when they arrive. Halstead said nothing. You used the word ungrateful, I said. I've been thinking about that word. I'm grateful for this internship. I'm grateful for the work. What I did this morning was not a failure of gratitude, it was the point of the whole thing. I'm here to be useful. This morning I was useful. I didn't look at Ferris. I didn't look at Dana. I looked at Halstead until he looked away, and then I folded my hands on the table and waited. Cho signed something brief. Dana said, he says that will be all for today. 6 months later I had a full-time offer on paper and a desk on the 3rd floor with my name on the door panel. Not a big panel, just the kind that slides in and out, but it had my name. On the corner of the desk beside my laptop I kept Theo's flashcard binder. The yellow cardstock edges were softer than ever now, from the move and the unpacking, and the one morning I'd flipped through the whole thing from the beginning, sitting on the floor of my new apartment, for no particular reason except that I wanted to. The hand shapes Theo had drawn were still clean, still correct, in the careful pen print of a 7-year-old who had decided, with complete seriousness, to make himself a proper set of tools. Theo had come to visit in March. We'd gone to a diner on 5th Avenue for breakfast and I'd watched him sign to the waitress, just a simple order, just coffee and eggs, and she'd signed back, awkwardly but gamely, and Theo had looked at me afterward with the expression I'd known since he was 7 years old, the one that meant something landed right. In April, Halstead sent me a LinkedIn connection request. No message. Just the request. I looked at it for a moment. I closed the app. Raymond Cho, I learned eventually, came back to the building once a month now. He always stopped at my desk when he passed through the 3rd floor. We'd sign for a few minutes, small things, his weekend, a book he'd read, whether the coffee on 4 was better than the coffee on 3. It always was. He always won that argument. The scarf he'd come back for that Tuesday in October, the one that started everything, it was dark green wool, and he wore it every time I saw him through the fall. It became a kind of landmark. I'd see that green at the elevator doors and know he was coming, and I'd finish whatever sentence I was in the middle of and turn my chair toward the aisle. I kept Theo's binder on the desk because it was his and because it was mine, and because the work that looked like nothing, the years of flashcards on the bedroom floor, the library books, the two kids teaching each other a language the rest of the room didn't speak, had turned out to matter in a way I hadn't planned and couldn't have predicted. The thing that makes people dismiss you is sometimes the exact thing that was always supposed to matter. I turned the binder over in my hands one morning, feeling the soft give of the corners, the slight warp of the cardstock from years of use. Outside the third-floor window, Columbus was doing what Columbus does in April: gray sky, a little wind, the trees just starting to think about leaves. I set the binder down and opened my laptop and went to work. This is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. Names, characters, and events are entirely fictional.